Welcome back to the Seedy AF podcast. I'm Jocelyn.
And I'm the Omega. We're happy to have you join us for another episode where we delve into the world of adult game development. Let's get ready to explore the underbelly of our industry. Now let's get seedy.
A special thanks goes to our patron, Nick, and fellow adult game dev duo, Stone Fox Studios, for asking this episode's question. What were some of the challenges for adult game development you did not expect, and that other people might not expect?
So some of the challenges with our first game, Princess of Suburbia, this was back in 2017, mind you. One of the challenges were art costs. Because it was a 2D game, we were reliant upon 2D art. And that meant we were paying an artist to basically produce art. And in another episode, I talked about how I was working full-time at the time, but still wanted to do this on the side. So it was part-time. It was quite a bit of time investment to get the game started from the ground up, essentially. And that kind of also leads into project management. I had a programmer that I was paying and the artist and a little bit of GUI on the side too. Another challenge that we had with Prince Suburbia, one of the issues was making super busty female characters, not really having anything in between. And I should have been more mindful of that at the time.
And one thing I'll say about that too is that the original artist, Scarlett Ann, who designed all the original characters, that is her art style, is to have these really big, busty female characters.
Right.
And so in some sense, I think in a long-term business strategy sense, not having more diversity of breast size, I don't know that it's even a negative, but it's kind of a neutral, or it's something that people comment on, or perhaps wish that we had more variety. But, we don't have a counterexample to know, but there's a chance that if you hadn't been using her as the artist in the beginning, that you wouldn't have had as much of a following as you had, because she already had an audience that she brought to the game.
Right. And, I agree with that. And that was certainly a big aspect to it for sure. Really, the buck stopped with me. So if I wanted something different, I needed to press hard on that. So in the grand scheme of things, I'm pretty confident back in time, if I could go back and redo things, I'm pretty sure Scarlett Ann would have done something like that without much problem.
Yeah. And I think that kind of speaks to one of the, overarching challenges with this is that there are so many different moving pieces when you're a solo dev, or even us. We are 2 developers, but we're making 2 games. So in terms of workload, it's similar to being a solo dev. There's so many moving pieces between all the different things that you just can't think about all of the possibilities all the time. You just don't have the brain power sometimes to think about things that would be common sense if you just had a little bit more breathing room to think about it. You don't necessarily give as much direction as you should, simply because you're trying to manage so many people and so many things at the same time. You're basically just like, do whatever you want, just get it done,
Right. And as I've said also in a few of the episodes now, big boobs are one of my things. That's one of my fetishes. So admittedly at the time, I also had big booba goggles on, right? I was like, she's like, here's the sketch. What do you think of this character? And I was like, oh, it looks great, And the next sketch, exact same boob size. I'm like, yeah, big booba. Yeah, real good. Let's go. And then another challenge that I didn't really think about before, we started into Prince Suburbia in 2017 was dealing with the negative feedback. And I think this kind of resonates with a lot of adult game developers and game developers in general, which is it's so exciting and fun, to have your first release or two, just to see what kind of feedback you're going to get. And you're hoping you're making something that's going to be fun and that you're going to get players that are like, oh, that was great. That was so fun to play. I can't wait to see more. And then deep down you're going to get negative feedback that's going to be coming too. And you kind of brace yourself for it, but it kind of stings, and, everyone takes it differently.
Yeah, I think that's something too that was a challenge that I kind of anticipated, but did not anticipate the way that it would affect me. Obviously, when you're doing any type of content creation and you're putting your creations out into the world, you obviously are well aware that there's going to be negative feedback. Everybody tells you that you need to have a thick skin and just be prepared for it. And I think what I wasn't prepared for is that it's not so much that the negativity, that it hurts my feelings or that, it demotivates me or that I take it personally. It's more just irritating, especially because we get the same feedback over and over and over again. And especially when it's something that either was an intentional choice or it's something that we just can't change because we're too far into development. It just, for the person that's telling you, it's the first time that they're telling you. And intellectually, I understand that sometimes they're even trying to be helpful and constructive. Like they're saying it in a very positive way. Like, here's just a suggestion, or have you ever considered this? But when it's like the thousandth time that we've heard it, and, over the course of 6 years, then it's like really hard to just clench your teeth and be like, thank you for the suggestion, when that's like, when it's no mystery to you that that's a problem. I'm not trying to be vague here, but the one that we hear obviously the most with Prince of Suburbia is, oh, I wish it had more diversity of body types, and the art is made, the characters are designed, that is the way the game is. Luckily, we do have a huge audience of players that love that share the same fetish. And so for them, it's a great game because every character fits their fetish. We appreciate that there's lots of players that wish there was more variety. It's just not going to happen with that game. So, as much as we do appreciate constructive and positive feedback, it can wear on you to just have to, answer that one more time. Like, it's just, we feel the same way, but it's not going to change. I think the reason that happens, and it's also something that I didn't anticipate, is because the market is so undersaturated that people play games outside of what would be their normal preference. In the regular video gaming world, if you like first-person shooters, there's unlimited, first-person shooters for you to play. If you like platformers, there's new platformers coming out all the time. There's more than you could ever play in a lifetime. With adult games, especially with more niche games, there is just so much more demand than there is supply. And because it's all solo and small developers, the development takes a really long time. And so you just have a lot of players that are in between updates of their favorite games, have played everything that's out there, and are trying new things. And so you end up with a lot of players playing your game that probably shouldn't be playing it, if we're being honest, because it's just not their thing. And, I recognize that those players are really hungry for content, and I feel bad that we're not the game that they want to play. And I certainly don't want their money. I don't want them to waste their time on our game. So that part is kind of frustrating when you have players that really don't like your game and almost seem to hate it. And you're like, I don't know how to help you because I can't, like, you took the time to play it. I didn't hold a gun to your head and make you play it. If it was making you that unhappy, like, I would have just rather you not played it. And that's the part that does wear on you too, because we try to be super transparent with all of our promotional materials. This is something that I've thought about, is actually, I would love to do an episode where we talk about the difference between like regular indie games and adult indie games. And one of the big differences I've seen is that, with adult games, you don't have to go find the players. The players are already looking for games. Your job is to make sure that you get your game into the right players' hands. So we really go out of our way to be extremely transparent on our store pages. We have tons of GIFs from the game, tons of images. We describe the games really accurately. With Prince of Suburbia, we use the words kinetic and linear because it has no choices. The very first phrase in the trailer is big tits, because we want people to know this is a big tit kink fetish game. So that's the part too, where it's like, you don't want to get mad at players that are, disliking your game, but it's really frustrating. Like, why are you even playing it in the first place? Those are just challenges that we couldn't have anticipated until we really got big and we started getting like really a lot of attention from different players. That was most of the challenges that we had with Prince of Suburbia. And by the time that I was, quitting my old job and trying to turn this into a sustainable business that could be a full-time income, that was a totally different goal than just, hey, let's keep this passion hobby project alive and, breaking even. This was a totally different goal that we were trying to achieve. In some ways, we were probably better prepared than a dev, starting from scratch, even though it was kind of like a new phase of development for us. And so it was kind of like starting again. But we understood that a lot of the challenges of this industry. We were not, we were coming in with eyes wide open as far as a lot of the challenges that are unique to adult game development, like censorship and restrictions. We understood that there's so many moving pieces and that it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. So those are challenges that might surprise a new dev. For us, that part wasn't as surprising. However, I don't think that you can ever really be prepared for the sheer work involved in developing a game until you're doing it. And that was true for us even starting a second game, because with that game, we took on the art production and we decided to take a step up and from our previous game and do things that were more complicated so that we were showing that growth and development. So for a lot of the things that we were doing, they were brand new to us and we just could not have anticipated the amount of time that would be involved in making the second game.
And then, I'll pipe up here too a little bit. Some of the typical stuff that we anticipated and expected with the Shot in the Dark, for example, is something that we had to handle with Prince of Suburbia too, which is, the censorship due to the certain websites you have to use, the typical landlady and roommate stuff. You have to accommodate that and appease it in order to, continue to flourish in this industry, at least for the moment. Another challenge that we expected is, yes, yet another college game, right? There's plenty of those out there. And ultimately, we expected and anticipated the problem of how do we stand out from the rest of them. So we hope that we added our own little flavor and we do some special things that maybe some other devs don't do or do it a little bit differently so that we can stand out. And then one more thing that we expected that would be a challenge, and we've actually had quite a few doubters, but so far it seems to be going all right, which is we have a lot of branching. And the players who have played our game already, A Shot in the Dark, they know that the choices that you make actually influence what happens in the game. And it is challenging from a coding and a game design and a writing perspective, 100%. But we're hoping that that's one of the challenges that we've anticipated well enough to account and adjust for it. So some of the challenges with the second game, A Shot in the Dark, that I didn't expect are sometimes for some of the things like how long can it actually take to develop some of the more complex game features, the in-depth features, like the texting, for example, took a while in A Shot in the Dark. The photogram content didn't take as long, but it's also the sloppiest code that's in the game, which bugs me and it bugs anybody I have to show about it. And I wish it could have been improved, but sometimes, and I would imagine this resonates with some other game developers too, which is sometimes you just say good enough and you got to keep moving on because for time's sake, essentially. Also, how grueling it can be sometimes to get through some of the updates. Life happens. Sometimes, you're just feeling down in the dumps someday. Sometimes, you're struggling for whatever reason to get through the next piece that you have to do. And, on one hand, it can be helpful if you have multiple responsibilities. You can knock some of those things out and then come back to the thing that is kind of like a roadblock for you. But sometimes, the simple truth is it can just be grueling to get through it sometimes to get to the update. But it feels so good once you reach it and actually have the release. And that weight is off your shoulders, even if it's just temporary since you have more to do. Another thing that I didn't necessarily expect is that even though we think some features are fun, even if they're complex too, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to appeal to everyone. A good example might be the texting feature that we have. Like, it's great for the first playthrough, but something that we're still kind of refining is like, how does it feel for second playthroughs, third playthroughs? And, we've responded with a way to speed up the texting feature, for example, but that may not be the final iteration. We'll see.
I think something that a lot of people probably don't anticipate is how much perfectionism can hold you back. And I think that both you and I have really high standards for ourselves. And so that can push us to sometimes spend more time on things than is worth it. And I think that's also compounded by the fact that, yes, sometimes you get player feedback that is constructive. They have a very valid criticism, and you have to really weigh, is it worth the time that it would take to change that thing? Is it worth going back and changing the entire game essentially in order to make it a better player experience or to appease, a large number of players that are having this problem? And, sometimes you have to make the uncomfortable decision of, no, I'm just going to let my game be less than perfect because it would not be worth the time that it would take to go back and change that thing because it would delay future development. And everything takes so long already as it is. You really have to weigh carefully if you're going to go back and change things. I know a lot of players complain about devs doing remastering and remakes. We are remastering and remaking our first game, Prince of Suburbia. So in that sense, I understand devs who do it. However, I feel like we try to be really intentional about going back and redoing things in small pieces so that it did not take a lot of time away from future development. And there are some things in the beginning of the game that we will never remaster because it's just not worth the time. And so that's a really difficult decision to make because most developers, in my experience, they have very high standards for themselves. In order to do this, you have to be really hardworking and you have to be somebody that really puts a lot of effort into things. And so you have to hold back your perfectionist tendencies maybe more than I anticipated. I anticipated that would be a challenge. I didn't anticipate how many different ways it would be a challenge. It's not just about, oh, this render is good enough, now I'm going to render it. It's also about your overall game and knowing that you're never going to be able to make it as good as you want it, or you would just never finish it. Something that kind of surprised me in a way was that I knew that it would be a lot of work, and I knew that it would be hard. And I think kind of at this point now that I've been doing this full time for 2 years, I would say that none of the individual pieces are really all that hard or super difficult. It's more just the overarching amount of work that is so difficult to manage, and all the different pieces that you're having to think about, and switching from one hat to another, switching from coding to art to writing, and, trying to keep everything straight in your mind. That's the part that is a little bit more challenging than maybe I expected. One of the biggest things that I did not anticipate is that the stigma and the censorship around adult games would affect us in the ways that it has. So as the Omega said, we were on the scene before all the big stuff that happened in 2017, 2018, like the Omega said, with the landlady and all that. So that part we anticipated would always be an issue in this industry. And we basically are just always waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the next platform to have some kind of restriction or issue. That's just something that we accepted as part of this industry when we got into it. So it doesn't really stress us out. We don't spend a lot of time worrying about it. But what I didn't anticipate is how hard it would make it to scale our business. When you're first starting out as a small dev, sometimes you can get enough cash together to hire out parts of what you do to other people that you typically find within the industry. It's not a very big industry. We have our places where we gather. You can find people that will do some coding, do some writing, do some whatever. You pay them a little bit of money. So we've been doing that since the very beginning. And we have quite a few team members who work for us. And for them, it's a side hustle. They have a full-time job or other people that they work for. And we're just one small piece of that. So understandably, not their top priority. And they get to us when they get to us. And that's fair for what we're paying. And it's great. We love it. But what I didn't anticipate is how we would manage that middle ground as a small business before you're at the point that you can hire full-time employees, but you're kind of beyond just hiring people for piecemeal things. Typically, that's the stage in which now you're going to contract out to a company that handles that. So you're getting a professional to help you with it, but they just aren't doing it for you full-time. That is extremely hard to find. The issue is either that they don't want to work with adult games or that type of content, or that's not the issue, but they just don't know what we need. We know better what we need because we've been in this for many years. There's just not a lot of people out there that know as much as we know. And then on top of that are experts in the things that we need. So that's the part I just didn't really I don't think we could have anticipated, is how hard it would be to manage this middle ground of trying to scale your business when you're in a very stigmatized industry.
And as you said before in a different podcast episode, you need a demonic skill set especially if you're going to be a solo game dev in this space too.
As far as what other people might not anticipate being a challenge, one of the most common things that I see players saying, or sometimes I see aspiring devs say this, and I don't blame them because we said this too, which is essentially like, when we get big enough, then we'll hire someone to do that. And I see a lot of devs tell me that, well, I'm going to do this piece until I get enough money, I will hire someone else to do it. Or players constantly asking, why hasn't XYZ developer hired somebody to help them with things when they have so much money? People don't really want to hear it. But the reality is, it is not that simple. And I know that's easy for me to say and maybe hard for you to believe, but if we could hire out, we would hire more out. There are so many things that we do every day that are not the types of things that owners are typically doing for a company our size. And we would happily hand off if we could find somebody that knew how to do them, that we didn't have to spend more time explaining how to do these things than it would take to do them. But that is the reality that is unexpected for us and kind of unfortunate for us, is that it is just really hard to hire people. And I think 80 to 90% of the people that we ever start talking to about doing something ever actually end up doing something for us. And within that, it's extremely rare for somebody to stay with us for more than a few months, which is not necessarily a knock against those people. They often have very good reasons for not wanting to stick around, but it just makes it so that, like, what is even the point of training somebody and explaining to somebody what needs to be done just to have them do it for 3 months, and then we're stuck having to go find somebody and train them again. At that point, you've it's more time to do all that than it is to just do that thing. I don't think players understand how they're not hiring out because they're control freaks. They're not hiring out because they're greedy. It just really isn't worth it a lot of the time. And that is kind of a sad reality that we've had to face.
Yeah, and a big part of that too, and as Jocelyn was saying, like, it's completely fair, and you have to expect this because this is like side gig stuff for these people. And yeah, if once they're done doing the gigs and make the money they want to make, it's not a surprise if they want to dip out and do something else, especially if you can't offer them, something more than that, something closer to full time, even if it's not, right? So if you don't have the capital yet in order to offer that, then you have to expect that you're not going to be able to necessarily keep people around forever.
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely no resentment or hard feelings from us. I only even mention that because I want players to understand the reality of it, that we've talked to other developers and they have experienced the same thing, that it's really hard to find people in the first place, that it's hard to get them to actually do anything, and then it's hard to keep them around. But it's not to disparage those people that are doing gigs in this industry. Most of them are very lovely people that do a great job. There's just lots and lots of very valid reasons why that it doesn't become a long-term thing. So I will say that we do have quite a few team members, and they're all wonderful, lovely people, and we really appreciate them. I think the thing I didn't expect about that piece of it is that having quite a few people, having team members helping us doesn't actually save us any time, and it doesn't really speed up development. But what it does do is it really increases the quality of our work. So that's the part that I didn't expect, but it's still really cool to see, which is that in that sense, it is worth it for us, especially with things like writing, to take the time to go find people, to get them up to speed, to give them the time that they need to work on it because they're working around their other life obligations. If we have that patience to do those things, then we get really amazing results. And, Mute Hazelnut, we gave her a shout out in one of our previous episodes, has written a lot of amazing scenes for A Shot in the Dark. Her mind is just totally different than mine. And so she comes up with things that I would never come up with. And therefore it makes the writing stronger because, she writes it, then I can come in and revise. We talk about ideas together. It almost feels like for me, like I have a writer's room, like I have a TV show, and maybe I'm the lead writer, but I have these other script writers that I can turn to write things for me and just really strengthen the writing. So in that sense, as a writer, it's nice not to be in an echo chamber, and it's worth every penny and it's worth every minute of my time to manage that side of the project, even though it doesn't actually make anything any faster. If anything, it makes it take longer because the scenes they write are so great and I want to add on to them. So I make them longer, and then it ends up being a ton of art to make. So if anything, it makes the process take longer, but then we end up with much cooler and stronger writing because of it.
Yeah, I've always been super impressed ever since we started hiring some of the writing out. And yeah, when I first saw what can come out of that, the more polished product, I was like, okay, all right, I like what we got here.
Yeah, for sure. So, I hope that sheds some light for players on how why a lot of developers aren't hiring out, and even the ones that are, why it's not really speeding things up. It seems like it should work that way, but, believe us or not, I can tell you from this side of things after many years of experience that it just doesn't really quite work that way. It doesn't mean that we're going to stop trying. We do still have ambition to make a third game and try to find ways to hire out pieces in a way that allows us to have sustainable growth. It just is that we have to be more creative than business owners in a different industry would have to be. So we hope that sheds some light on some of the challenges that we face. I will say for me that being an adult game developer is still one of the most fun jobs that I've ever had. And despite being challenging in the sense of having to manage a lot of things and having to do a lot of different types of tasks and having to be my own boss and manage all the stress of that, it's still a lot easier in a lot of ways and has a lot more flexibility and fun than a lot of other jobs that I've had. And I don't think I would ever go back to any of those prior jobs. And I will continue to make adult games until the platforms kick us off of every platform. So that's how I feel about it. Even though it's challenging, it is more than worth all the challenges because of all the great parts of it. They make it worth it.
Yeah, I agree. We don't have to answer to any other bosses. We get to work together, which is amazing. We both have our offices right next to each other, go to each other all the time. And yeah, it's so freeing to be able to work when you want to work. But yeah, the freedom and flexibility of being able to do this, but also to be able to create really fun and amazing products that fans enjoy is really a rewarding experience for us.
And one more thing that I wouldn't say is a challenge, it's a good part of it, but that I didn't anticipate is because we do work with content that is quote unquote not safe for work. That means a lot of things that are typically not safe for work are entirely appropriate for our work. And I think that that creates a tone that just allows for a lot more openness and fun, because even with our own team on our own team Discord, I feel like there's a feeling that we can talk a lot more openly about topics, especially sex, because that is the topic that's bringing us all together. And so it's a lot less stuffy than a lot of other environments that I've worked in. And it's a very open, free, fun environment to work in. And I appreciate that as well. And that's something that I did not expect.
If you have more questions or topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to reach out to us through email, Patreon, Twitter, Instagram, or any of the other platforms that we're on, and we promise to do our best to get back to you. It's been a blast so far answering all of your questions, and we hope we get more, and we want to share our experiences with you, and we hope we planted some seeds with you. See you next time.
Bye.